Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Outside of the Box. And I'm so excited to be joined by Jonathan Schultz from Team Huge, one of the most beloved robots in the sport. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. So Huge has been around since 2018, which has been a while in BattleBots. Very exciting to kind of see where Huge has come from then to now. Is it definitely looks like the same robot, but there's also been noticeable changes over the course of time. I know one thing from last year. I'm pretty sure it was mentioned that the motor was twice as powerful last year as it had been in the past, and there were definitely some differences with the wheels, which I think, to me, I think that made a notable difference, kind of just in the way that it performed in 2021 season versus the year prior. Do you feel that those changes made a difference for you?
For sure. I think it came through well, and I almost wish we'd gotten more of a chance to show off some of it, because we had lots of little ideas sitting in the back and under a tarp or in a crate that nobody got to see because we fought a lot of like very, tall things, that the big vertical spinners like Riptide and Uppercut and Switchback and everybody. But yeah, it was a big growth year for sure. And I think that was in part because the last couple of years were tougher and for learning. And then this was kind of it all coming together and saying, okay, we know how to put a lot of power in it. We know how to make it spin up right. And, it's been a while since we won a fight really good. So let's go wreck some people. And that was our mindset going into the season.
Yeah, and I mean, my heart actually broke at the beginning of last season because your first match was against Riptide, which
Yeah.
which is a rookie bot, but like a really good.
It turns out they're
bot.
great. I mean, who?
I'm sure that first match you were hoping for positive results to just come out and start. I mean, they box rushed you like a lot of people tend to do. They were really aggressive, and unfortunately I think by design, with the way that the wheels are on Huge, if a wheel gets stuck in those screws, it's pretty impossible to get out. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that, that match and what happened there?
Yeah, it's hard from our perspective because we've been on the show for years. Everybody knows Huge. Everybody knows how it fights in most cases. And like I'm doing my best to scout out all the rookie stuff and watching as many fights as I can for people. But truthfully, for Riptide, I had like 2 or 3 fights with a random 3-pound robot that he built, and I had nothing really to go on for how he was going to drive and how they were going to fight and how the robot worked, because it was brand new. They'd never built anything that big before. And it's the same for our later fights with Retrograde and stuff. I have no idea what's going to happen. But yeah, we thought we could get out of the screws. They changed some of the shaping of it, which might have hurt us. We also might have just been overconfident, which might have hurt us. We think we have some ideas for how to prevent it, but it's ultimately one of those things, like we don't get testing time in the arena, so it's like we're not really going to know until the next time we land in it, and ideally going to try not to. But that's just part of it, For everyone else, they're worried about the shelf. For us, we have to worry about the screws.
Right, that is true. One thing that I thought was interesting is that when they interviewed Riptide after the match was over, there was a brief talk about the fact that Huge can choose to spin up or spin down. Mm-hmm. And you did the opposite of what they expected, but it actually seemed to work in their favor because they were afraid of the other way. I mean, do you think that if you had chosen to go the other way with that it would have made any difference at all?
I think given the way they box rush, it might have pushed us towards the middle of the arena instead of backwards. It was kind of our plan was spin up for a little while and see if it goes well, and if it doesn't go well, spin down, because it's not something we expect being Huge. We're never expecting in game planning that we're only going to get one hit and that the fight's going to be over in 10 seconds, because we're trying to be the most resilient robot. We figure, and we've had a lot of fights, where we lose for the first minute and then we make a strategy change or just the momentum turns and then we can come back and win the fight, and that's what we're game planning with the idea of. And for it to just be like, spend months building a robot, it's been a year since 2020, we're ready to go kick some butt, and then it's just over in 10 seconds. It's like, it's so shocking for us because I don't think we've ever had a fight that went like that since like Ice Wave or something, ripping us in half immediately. Yeah, it might have changed it, but it's there's other things we know with the design that can keep that from happening again that we're making changes for. And then it's not something we have to worry about, I think. Both falling in the screws, but also, the way they hit us upwards was not what we expected. How slow Huge came out of the starting square was not something we expected. So like there was definitely, obviously you learn a lot more when you lose. And we went in feeling all right about it, and then we learned a lot very quickly.
Yeah, I mean that's true. It never feels good to lose, but
No.
you find out a lot about your robot, from that, and things that you could do differently. And you certainly did that, in the second match against Retrograde. Very different feelings. I think that in that match, what I noticed is that you were very patient. You kept working to kind of get them squared up the way that you wanted them to be, and were able to capitalize on that. And like you said, that it finally worked. It worked the way that you wanted it to. And like, yeah. I mean, I'm sure that had to feel great.
A lot of it is, some of it is the experience, but a lot of people can't keep their strategy for too long, so we knew what Retrograde was going to try to do was immediately put us back in the screws. And so in driving, we needed to not put ourselves in a position where we're going to be vulnerable to that. And that means, maybe I'm not, rushing as hard as I can at them, but I don't want to miss and end up right in front of the screws, and then they're just going to push us back in the screws. And so it was the tactics side of it where it's like, well, we have to just try and, I guess, corner them and stay slow and wait for them to try and come in and approach us in the middle of the arena where we want it. And it works out. But like, there's a lot of cases where we end up in screws quickly. There's a lot of cases where maybe we hit Retrograde differently in a place that's more resilient. Like we were very much looking at that fight like our fights with Whiplash, where they just bullied us for a long time because they were really tough. And Retrograde was built very tough, and we were like, crap. We have no video on this robot, so we again don't know how, how it really drives and moves and how they want to do it. B, we know it's from a great team. C, we know it's built really tough because we went over and looked at it. So we're like, all right, we need to make the same game plan that we do for Whiplash and say, be really safe, hit them really hard when we get the chance to, and then it's just, everything finally panning out and it finally working properly was all the relief coming out. But it was definitely the product of a lot of, like I said, the learning and stuff, because it's very hard to make something look easy, and there's a lot of ways that things can go wrong.
Yeah, definitely. And it's so funny because I do not hide the fact that I hate the upper deck, but the end of that match was the only time that I've ever been grateful for the upper deck, because it was just so fun to see Huge get up there, and kind of celebrate the win. It was just a good moment overall. Probably one of my favorite of the season.
I appreciate that, because it was, we didn't know if we were going to be able to get up there, because it's not like we can test these things, but it was a good moment for my team also, because it's like we're all working on the robot the same. It's not just me. And it was one of the things I liked the idea, but they all loved the idea. As soon as they saw the upper deck, they said, we're going to climb it. We're going to kill somebody and we're going to climb it. And, you can see in the video, my whole team is like going nuts behind when I drive up there. And I just think it was like a really good moment for us, is like, we're not out of this, we're 1-1. We're going to keep this great version of Huge winning and keep momentum. And I think it really it hyped us all up for things after what would have been a pretty bad stretch considering 2020 and then the Riptide fight. So it was, for me at least, it felt very much like a reset. And part of running around on the deck was that, because it was like, hey, we're still confident, even though we've lost however many fights. Like we still believe in the robot and what it can do.
Well, right. I mean, sometimes I think you need that because, I mean,
Yeah.
to me, as a fan, and I think a lot of the builders feel the same way. I mean, obviously it's nice to win, but really the spirit of BattleBots is just, going out there, having a good fight, seeing what your robot can do. But it's still hard when you feel like you're not achieving what you want to achieve with it. And, so
Yeah.
I mean, that was just great to hear you say that you finally got what you wanted out of it.
Right. It was definitely if they cancel the show or we retire, at least we can retire happy that it worked. Because like you've seen the past seasons and stuff, it'll be really slow, or we didn't have to wait for bike tire, or the weapon spins up in 30 seconds or whatever slow speed it was that year. And it's like finally it's just, it's murder huge. It chases people down, it spins up quick, hits really hard. Yeah. In the perfect world for me, the show, everyone would win a fight, somehow, some way, everyone would win a fight, but we all feel like we got what we came for a little bit. You get that. Obviously, reality happens. You can't always win a fight, but that's just, everyone has that brightness about them when they just want to fight. That I think keeps us all coming back.
Yeah, definitely. Now the next fight after that was against Switchback. I mean, you could probably elaborate more on this, obviously, because you were, there to see it, but they didn't seem like they were quite at 100%. They did obviously keep coming at you, and I think what ended up happening is that they just got too close to Huge's weapon, and then they ended up paying for it from there. So kind of talk to me a little bit about that one.
Yeah, it was interesting. I never got the full answer on them from what died, because I know the drive is different from the arm, and there wasn't a lot of arm left, but we hadn't done much to the base. Um, I had heard that they were having some issues with drive overheating or something like that, and it could have been that. And credit to them for, you know, still coming in and trying to fight us rather than running away to go preserve and stuff. It made a better fight, A, but it also probably helped us win. Um, but yeah, it was before the fight, the whole day was a blur because we fought Retrograde and Switchback in the same day.
Oh,
So the stories of like our drive is overheating. Yeah, great. Like I'm half asleep. I'm wigged out on caffeine. I'm wigged out on adrenaline because I already won a fight earlier in the morning. Like it was just such a blur of a day that it's hard to say exactly what was up. And if they told me afterwards, I probably didn't remember because it was a big day.
is that pretty common that the televised fights, even though they're in different episodes, actually happen in the same day?
It hasn't been. It was a bit more common this year. There was a few cases this year. In the case of most teams, they come with multiple assembled robots. We have stuck with one robot that is huge and all the spare parts on the shelf. And so we're, turning around the same robot really fast. And I think in that sense, it was a bit more stressful on us than for the teams that have multiple fully assembled ones. But I mean, I have a normal size house, a normal size basement. Where do I put multiple fully assembled huges? It's a logistical issue. But there's things like, the drive dying early in the switchback fight. That maybe doesn't happen if we don't turn the robot around in an hour between fights, just because you have the chance to check everything over a little bit more. You never know. But I do know that if I had a totally separate second robot, at least the first one wouldn't have had that issue because it would be a different one and all the parts would have been fresh. And so that's kind of one of our 2022 things was just we're going to stop beating around the bush and we're going to bring two, build two, and not have to deal with that kind of turnaround anymore. Because yeah, if the show keeps having turnarounds like that, it's just a level of added stress that I think nobody needs. But yeah, I mean, people did it. I think Kraken fought twice in a day. Pretty sure Glitch fought twice. I want to say Ghost Raptor fought twice, and the first one was Cobalt, and they like fixed, or maybe they just had a second one. It's very blurry.
I
But
hope they
like,
had a second robot if they found
yeah,
Cobalt and then another one.
they ground up the first one and they just no. Yeah, it happened a fair bit this year. It's like it's a surprise at the time because it's not like you get a lot of the schedules beforehand. And then we kind of saw it coming because our fight with Retrograde had been pushed to the end of the day and they were running late, so we were waiting in line. And the day ends and we hadn't fought yet. We're like, well, we better be fighting twice tomorrow. So we were able to get ready a little bit in advance. But then, yeah, the schedule came out. You're fighting Retrograde first thing, and you're fighting Switchback at the end of the day. So be ready. Oh, and Retrograde fought again. That after we tore it up, they had a second Retrograde, and so they fought Defender the same evening as well. So.
Yeah, that's something that I've heard. That has really become more necessary over the years. That it didn't used to be that you had to bring all of these extra robots, but then when some teams started doing it, then obviously that gives them an advantage, and all of the teams really need to be doing it so that everybody's on the same level. I mean, have you noticed that is like more common since you first started at BattleBots?
Definitely, it's a lot of things. Power level, everything's a little higher, everyone's a little better at it, but it's also, I put a lot of it on bounty hunters too, because my first 2 seasons we did the regular season over the course of like a week and a half or whatever, and you have break days, and like we had probably a day or two between each of our fights in our first season. And this year the entire filming for the first 10 episodes was in 4 days with a break day in between. So it's like there's a difference because we know that there's like welders outside and machinists and stuff, but like there's just isn't enough time to make new parts. There isn't enough time to weld stuff back together. You just have to pitch it off to the side and grab something else because like we've got 3 hours go, and then all that time is put more into like round of 32 and bounty hunters and stuff, which is fine, but 10 episodes of your show is like the first 10 that everybody watches. So it ends up with stuff like, people put the robot in the arena and it doesn't work because they got their stuff broken in the first fight and didn't realize it or something like that. So it all has its like trickle down effects.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the regular season last year was great, 2-1. I mean, that's a good record. When you only get
we were happy with it. So yeah, really? we only get 3. It's you gotta finish strong when you start like that.
Yeah, for sure. Now, obviously with that record, you got into the tournament. I really want to talk about that fight because, BattleBots chose to not air it fully. So from a fan perspective, we didn't get to see the whole thing, not even remotely. It was, I understand obviously some fights they have to cut, if maybe one is shorter or not as exciting as others, and they just don't show all of it. From what I saw, it looked like you hit them really hard because both bots went flying.
Murder huge.
They were able to take the hit, and Alex came back very aggressive, and it ended up in a double KO. So like since I didn't, obviously see a lot of what happened other than just that minimal scope, kind of like let me know what led up to the double KO and everything.
It is on YouTube also, so there is that.
Okay.
The whole fight, but it's definitely different. It is extremely fast still. That giant hit was the first hit, and we nearly pitched them out of the arena on it. So, part of me wishes there's some electrical things going on. This season's Huge was probably at about 80% of its top speed, just due to some electrical stuff. And I think about it, when you're going to bed, it's like, what if it was 100%? They might have just gone over the rail and then you win. But yeah, we pitched them almost out of the arena. We flew back onto the shelf. They flew to the wall, and then we both wandered back to the middle, kind of dazed. We hit again. I think like we tipped them over backwards and they self-righted. And then in that moment, our blade had spun down. which we didn't think would happen. And so I, as the driver, was like, uh-oh, back up. And that was like that whole long chase across the arena was them chasing me because I was backing up. And we're spinning up the whole way as we back up. And then once we got to the corner, I think I had knocked like all the ears off of it and stuff. So they could just sneak in, and they hit it right in the body. And again, like we've never had the whole robot just die as a result of one hit. And it was that some specific little part in this controller on one side died, and the exact same part on the other side's controller also died. Totally separate electronics and everything. It's just the same failure happened twice. And so, it wasn't a single thing, it was multiple, but it all happened just because Uppercut hits so darn hard, and because we'd never been hit like that before, because Switchback didn't hit us like that, not that hard. And yeah, that was it. They kept, rushing into us because I think they thought we were still alive. Like we could still use the weapon. That still worked mostly. And then once they hit the weapon, they tipped themselves over because we ripped all the ears off. And they, if I remember correctly, they stopped the fight. Trey went in and said, no, they're not stuck on the rail. They're just tipped over. And so it went to a double knockout, which we were pumped about because we knew Huge was dead. And so any chance for us to get it to the judges, you never know. It's better odds than admitting that we were dead 5 seconds earlier and getting counted out for it. And now they have actually, I think it's in the rules now for the upcoming season that like it can be a double knockout even if there's a 2 or 3 second gap if the counts haven't started yet or something like that. So more formally what ended up happening anyways. But yeah, it was chaotic because like I think the whole thing start to finish was probably like 20-25 seconds, so
Oh,
it's
wow.
just it goes from like the hardest Huge has ever hit anything to flying over the shelf, landing, hit each other again, run away, get hit, fight's over. And
Wow.
we knew it would be fast, but it's like in that environment, it's so much faster than it feels like, when you're really racing around the arena like that. And that's new for Huge. That's stuff that this one could do that the other ones couldn't. But it's learning.
That is true. And kind of, I don't know that it's necessarily learning, but one match that I want to talk about, not from this last season, but I feel like I have to ask a couple of questions about it just because it's one of the most talked about matches in the last 2 years is in 2020, your fight against Hydra. Which it was very obvious after the match kind of how you felt about how that
Yes.
went down. But really like my questions about that one specifically is that I think for you, and I know like that's the way that I felt about it also, is like many robots have used various contraptions to deal with other robots. I mean, Hypershock has used a broom. Like there's many different things
Right.
that other teams have done. But I think that the big issue in that fight was using that and not using your primary weapon
Right.
in any kind of offensive way. Um, was that kind of what the sticking point was for you, is that there was no offense, there was no damage, no attack, and
Yeah.
you were kind of pinned in a way that you couldn't do anything.
Yeah. I think, what I said on the show, there was a lot of the heat of the moment and a lot of like, let me tell you something going on, but thinking about it after the fact, why does this feel different than another fight, right? Even why does this feel different than other fights that season that were controversial about weapon usage? And I think it was because it just felt like we were, I don't know. I felt like that they weren't respecting the viewers or their time or anything like that by saying, we're going to make this terrible to watch, because they could have used the weapon. They could have designed things to use the weapon. For God's sakes, it took 20 seconds for that Huge to spin up to full speed. They didn't even need the bike rack. They could have just beaten us normally, because that Huge had, technical issues because we were learning stuff. We obviously weren't going to tell them that in the lead up to it. but like I think that was the thing, is it just made everyone feel like crap watching it, in ways where a robot that really is trying to kill the other guy, but probably using a wedge to do it, doesn't make us feel like crap. And that was, the pinning and everything. So happily enough, there's like 10 rules about it now because of all the different stuff as a result of it. But like, and we have plans, so there won't be another bike rack because it won't work the same. Those are the things that are in the crate still. But yeah, at the time it was just like, you spend all this money, you take all the time off work, you fly out here. At the time, it was middle of a pandemic, nobody been vaccinated yet, and we're just like, is this what we came to Los Angeles for? So is this what they came to Los Angeles for? Also, I don't know how you feel good about, because like,
does your challenge still stand? Do you still say, hey, Hydra, fight us, without the fancy cage
oh yeah,
thing, and just mono a mono and see what happens?
yeah, they've got like this whole vertical spinner attachment designed for us, and I'm fine with either. I still think it's a bit lame to have a whole separate weapon just for us, but I'm confident about beating it, and I'm confident about beating regular Hydra too. So I'm happy with it, with a future match. But like, if it never happens, I think I think it made enough positive change in Huge the robot that in the end it was almost worth it, because now we're so much more focused on the speed and fast spin ups and changing our fighting style. Whereas I think part of why it worked so well was our fighting style was very slow originally, and he could exploit that, with the control, because like he pushes on the hammer and the hammer hit our blade, right? Okay, now it's going to take me ages to spin back up again because that's what that Huge was like. It's a different fight if I'm not afraid to hit the arena in some way with my blade, or it's a different fight if I'm not afraid to climb up on the upper deck and jump over the top of the damn bike rack. Like it's different. It's a different game now for sure, but it worked. If all that matters is the little token that says you won, then it did what it was supposed to do.
Now that leads into my next question, because, obviously, as you know, Huge is a robot that, all of the teams have to prepare a different way for, because it's so unique and so different. Is there any robot that is not Huge that like you kind of have to think a certain way about, and how you're going to prepare to put Huge up against it?
Yeah, definitely. It's something that's evolved over time for sure. Because like the first year we showed up with like, this is Huge. Ta-da! One. And it's grown from there with different wheel options and bar options and stuff. There is definitely still, like, we fight, it has been announced already, but our first round fight for the, not bounty hunters, Battlebots champions, I think they're calling it. Our first round fight for that is Deep Six. And that is probably highest on the list, even preseason. You're just like, we got to figure something out, because we're going to die if we don't. And it's a modified version of the front chin guards and stuff that reaches like a mile out forwards to try and jam up the spinner and stuff. But like, it's just, there's things that are, I'm not going to say impossible, but much, much more challenging. If you're Huge, fighting Deep Six, fighting Ice Wave, when we look at who we fight, fighting Deep Six, fighting Ice Wave, fighting Son of Oyachi, like there's just always going to be people that are a much harder matchup than others. And that's just the nature of signing up to bring Huge to an event, because the trade-off is that I don't lose sleep really hard over all the little vertical spinners normally, and I'm not as worried about end game as the next person. And so it's, we've said it before, if we ever get past the first round of the playoffs, we're probably set, because all the unique stuff is already lost by then. So by that point, it's just the conventional things we're designed to beat.
Definitely. And I'm curious too, because I know, even though they're both large bots, but they're still often compared because of that, even though the actual mechanics are different in a lot of ways. But I mean, I know when I talked to Mammoth, they talked about the fact that they're always having to evolve the robot because of the fact that everybody now knows Mammoth. A lot of teams have fought Mammoth, and they
Mhm.
they have like this game plan down of what to do. Do you feel that you also have a
Oh yeah.
higher pressure on you to constantly evolve because of the fact that teams have to prepare so specifically, and that you've fought so many of them already that they kind of know what to do?
Absolutely. It's some of what I mentioned about like the more powerful weapon motors and spinning up so much faster. That's reactive because everyone's strategy became to sit underneath it. So it's all right, we're gonna make that cost something. Where if we get away even for a second, we're spinning fast enough that we're gonna do some damage when you take that hit again. Um, but it's also like and Ricky feels this as well because I know I've talked to him about it, but it's tough when you're largely the only person going at it, like I figure Hypershock can learn from Witch Doctor, who can learn from Bite Force, who can learn from Endgame, and I can learn from an array of random 3 and 30-pound robots that other people built that I follow very closely and generally talk to them about, because otherwise there's nothing, there's no comparison to it. So everything that we're out there trying, yeah, sometimes it doesn't work, but we're the only people trying it. I'm sure that there is some attachment or whatever that Endgame made and then saw it didn't work on somebody else and then just changed their game plan and you never saw it because they learned. For us, it's let's go see. So that was stuff like the wheels with Son of Waiachi. These are unbreakable, we'll kill them, and then the wheel explodes because we did something else wrong. We just had to go learn that because there was no other way we were going to learn that from anybody else. So it's part of it, but I like the challenge of it because I like the challenge of doing something new. It's not as exciting to try and do the same thing, but a little better. I like the challenge of just thinking way outside of the box.
Something else I'm really curious about too is like for me, as a fan, when I look at last year, um, Tantrum, won the giant nut. Obviously, they
Mhm.
are a spinner in a sense, but they have a very unique design. It's not your standard robot that you see. After we had a couple years of Bite Force winning, a couple
Mhm.
years of Endgame winning, and it kind of, for me, broke the mold of the type of robot that can win the tournament. Did that give you any like hope, or like, hey, like Tantrum won,
A
like
little bit.
Huge could absolutely do this?
Yeah, and we have that too a little bit because like we have 3 and 30-pound huges and a 12-pound huge, and they've all done great in their competitions. But it still always comes back to like the types of robots you fight and the matchups you get and stuff. Um, in the case of Tantrum, it definitely suffers from um, it's so good that you forget how unique it is. And I think that there's a few robots in that camp because like Sawblaze and Scorpios are amazing, but also really, really unique besides similarities to each other at doing the hammer saw thing because nobody'd really done that before them. And they're not just doing it, but it's also terrifying. So, like, Tantrum suffers from that, but they are a very unique robot. And it does give a lot of hope because it's like, it shows that there's other paths to success. And I think the show needed that a little bit too, just because if it becomes who can build the best Bite Force, I don't think we last on TV for very long. Um, although maybe they should let me fight a few more of those Bite Forces, and then we'll see how it goes. But
Part of me secretly wants Bite Force to come back
yeah,
just to see what will happen. Because I mean, I think that everybody since the last time that they fought has stepped up their game and really
mhm.
done some great things from a design perspective. So it would just be really interesting to see how that would play out.
It would be. I don't know what I want more because in some ways he's a legend because you leave on top and there's always the like what if, right? But on the other hand, yeah, it would be amazing to see Fight Force lose because I just want to see it. I think everybody, and it's nothing against them. It's just like when someone's been on top for that long, you just want to. I literally just want to know what it looks like to see it lose, because there's nothing like it. It's never lost. It's never gotten destroyed. It lost one, but it never got destroyed. And I want my crack at it, obviously, but I think everybody who lost to it does. But that was Paul. He was never. It was never a robot designed like Tombstone, where it's gonna like rip you in half and stuff. It was always just gonna do one thing more than you could. It was 1 point better in everything, always. So it was always gonna win. And it's a mindset we've adopted a little bit, which in some ways makes it so Huge is maybe a little worse against Mammoth or Riptide or something, because we're more aimed at being general rather than bringing a robot that's like, this thing can really kill vertical spinners, but if it touches a horizontal spinner, it explodes. It's trying to be like that general purpose, if that makes sense. There's nothing on Bite Force that's not helping it win, and I think it's a mindset that leads to success.
Definitely. Now that we talk about that, is there anything, at least from a general perspective, that you can tell me about preparations for next season? That you're doing anything with Huge to try and upgrade it from 2021?
Yeah, to some extent, there's still stuff up in the air because we don't know when the season is or what it'll be. So there are some hard decisions that tend to get made very quickly once you have a deadline. But definitely 2 robots to not mess around with those kinds of things anymore. And otherwise, trying to bring more configurability to the body armor department. So like we lost a wheel against Switchback, we lost both wheels against Uppercut. And it's generally a mindset change of like we bring 50 some odd pounds of wheel into every fight. Maybe it doesn't have to weigh that much if it's something that's going to be hitting it a little differently. And 10 pounds can go a long ways. Those chin guards that we had on the front, I think was 5 pounds total for all of them. So to have 10 more means we can triple that, or we can put the weight somewhere else, or we can make a thicker top, or whatever we come up with that I think would serve us better. Along with that mindset I was saying of just like, what's the most important thing? Well, if we're not as worried about the wheels, the most important thing probably isn't the wheels, and it's probably the body, or it's probably an extra battery to make sure it goes longer, stuff like that. So I hate to say it, but it probably won't look all that different again. But it'll probably work that one bit better. And it's like I said when we were talking about retrograde, it's you don't see the little things sometimes, but what you do see is Huge being successful, and that's the aim. So we make the little changes to shrug off the hits, and then instead, we take that hit from Uppercut, it pops us up in the air, nothing bad happens to Huge, and then we go tip them over and win the fight. And if that happens, it's a totally different narrative about the season, basically, because then we're into the top 16 and we're fighting Riptide again, and who knows, because we learned a lot in that first fight. And if we win that, then we're in the top 8 fighting Sawblaze, and then we probably immediately die because it's Sawblaze. But it's in part because the season's so short. How you feel about it can change so quickly, and for the littlest things. And so that's really our focus, is nailing the littlest things. The random armor, making sure that little component doesn't fall off the PCB, that sort of thing. Making sure we can get out of the box really quick next time we're fighting something like Riptide. Because I think that changes it from, Huge has done pretty good for the last couple of years, and it's, making the playoffs, which is great. We're still making the playoffs, to like, we need to watch out for Huge. It's a contender, because that's where we feel it can be.
Yeah, I mean, with that weapon, especially like not
Right.
just the what you have to do to try and figure out, okay, how am I going to fight this? But like the weapon it's a powerful weapon.
It's
So I
now
mean,
Yeah, we were comparing numbers with Uppercut when we were in line with them because it's not they're not a team that we ever got a chance to chat with much before, which is hard to say because we've been in all these seasons together. But like, there's just a lot of teams, so there's sometimes you haven't gotten to meet people, and the numbers on how much energy we store and how hard we hit and stuff, we weren't that far off from each other because it's Uppercut, part of why they took over so much and stuff, it's because they're so much smaller than we are, where we can kind of control it a little more, which is a daring thing to say about Huge, is that we're more controllable, but it lets us utilize that amount of power differently. And I have a lot of hope from that because I would have thought they would have even more energy and more power. So we can turn that into something and keep that going, hopefully.
Exactly. Now I have to ask this too, because I think I don't know who I was talking to about this, but Rusty has now come out with the Rusty plushie. My first thought was that there needs to be a Huge plushie, but then I was like, no, we're talking about Huge. I think it needs to be a body pillow. I think that those would sell, like everybody would have to have a Huge body pillow.
I think so, but I will say we did not make this ourselves. This was from a very wonderful fan of ours named Julie, who made it and brought it to filming. But I swear I didn't preload a prop. This was literally just sits next to my desk. But we have a plushie Huge with a blade that turns and eyes and wheels and little legs and stuff. And she made it and she brought it to filming, I think 2019. And she's like, I made this for you. And we were like, I cannot express how much joy this brings me. Thank you so much. And it lives right here on my shelf because, yeah, we have not gotten on Kickstarter yet though for more of them. It's just kind of ours, but I have backed the Rusty Kickstarter because I'm really excited. I really, 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 really want a Rusty plush, and I want to put it next to or underneath or on top of or in some way around my fuzzy Huge. The body pillow idea might stay on the back burner a little bit, but
I would definitely buy one for sure. So yeah, I mean, hopefully, we're getting closer to the fall, so I would expect something to be known soon. Fingers crossed about next season. In the meantime, we'll have the champions thing happening soon. So all of us fans will finally get to see what happened there. But I'm definitely excited for things to come for Huge. I mean, I've always thought it's just such an amazing design and has such great potential, and I want to see that continue to grow.
We hope so. I mean, we were definitely worried, like if Huge struggles again, maybe it's not made for this show anymore, and we definitely saw enough in it, enough potential where it was something where we know if there's a season and we can make it to it, we'll be there with it just to see what we think it can do. That's always what it's been, is trying to go for that potential. So we believe we just need the opportunity to go show it.
Yes, definitely. Well, hopefully that will happen next season.
Really?
So we'll see. But for now, we'll go ahead and wrap things up. But again, I so very much appreciate you coming on the show and talking about one of the most unique robots in Battlebots. And make sure that everybody listening, we're on YouTube and Podbean, and follow us on Twitter and all that good stuff. But we'll see you next time on the show.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. It was fun.
You are welcome.